So when we think of good questions, I think many of us think of questions like this.
Have you ever seen this cameo before?
Or maybe like this.
Have you ever seen this woman?
Questions like this, with maybe a yes or no answer, or an either or answer, or ones that maybe try to trap people, can be highly effective in communication if the communication is in a courtroom. But those kinds of questions, when it comes to influence or persuasion, tend not to be as effective. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why asking good questions matters when we're trying to actually persuade or influence or negotiate with others. Then, I'm going to spend some time telling you what those good questions might look like. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I served on the Harvard Law faculty for 21 years. I'm currently a principal and founder of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you some examples of the kinds of questions in negotiation that you have found to be most effective, and maybe share with me the why behind that. So a principle of good lawyering in the courtroom is that the lawyer is only supposed to ask a question from the witness that they already know the answer to. When you are doing a cross-examination, the last thing you want is to ask a question that yields a surprise answer.
Surprise, surprise.
So when it comes to negotiation and influence, the opposite is true. We actually want to ask questions when we don't know the answer. But why is that the case? So let me give you 3 reasons why this matters. First, in a negotiation, if we're trying to influence someone, we actually need to know what are the things that are influential to them. That is to say, what is persuasive to them. And the only way we will know that is by asking good questions. So a very common error that people make in negotiation is that when they're preparing, they think about what is important to them and what do they want. That is literally half of what you need to prepare. The other half is what's important to the person on the other side of the table. And we often skip that. I literally have people say to me, well, I don't care about what they want. I need to get what I want.
Exactly.
The piece they're missing there is in negotiation, you are trying to influence or to persuade. And the best way to do that is to understand what would be persuasive. And that's why asking questions is important. The other thing I want to say about this is there are times, even in my own life, when I've thought, like, I fully understand this person, I think I know what matters to them, and then I'll start asking questions, and I realize, like, actually I had a lot of blind spots, or I didn't know that about them.
I could have been better.
And that piece of information often helps fix the puzzle or complete the puzzle in a way that gives me more strategies on how to influence them. But the second reason why asking good questions matters is that even if we could completely read their minds and completely read their hearts, asking good questions actually makes the other person feel seen and feel heard. Most people like to tell their story. Most people like to spin a yarn. And when you take the time to ask a question, you are showing that you care about them, that you're interested in the relationship. And that is incredibly valuable in a negotiation. So there are times when someone says, you know, this is really inefficient. I already know A, B, and C matter to the other person. Let's just get to it. And I'm sympathetic to that. I am, because we are all really busy. And what I know is taking that time to ask some questions and to hear their story is time well spent. The ROI, or return on investment, for that can be extremely high, short-term and long-term. The last reason for asking questions is that when you are asking good, open-ended questions, the other side of the negotiation is doing most of the talking. Now you might be thinking, why is that good? Well, the more talking that they're doing, the more we're actually learning about them. And the more we're learning about them, the more leverage we're going to have in the negotiation. And so, contrary to what I think is a common idea, which is that in a negotiation I need to be persuasive, therefore I should do most of the talking. Truth of the matter is, the way you're persuasive in a negotiation is by making the best arguments. And the best arguments come from having the best information. In fact, research by two researchers, Rackham and Carlisle, has shown that the most effective salespeople are people who spend a disproportionate amount of their time not making the argument for the thing they're selling, but actually asking the most questions. So hopefully I've persuaded you that asking questions is worth doing. Now I want to give you some tips on how to do that specifically. So now that you know why it's important to ask questions, let me tell you how to do it effectively. So the first secret to asking good questions is to cultivate your own curiosity. Now that may sound easy, but I think it's really hard to do because in a negotiation, when you've done a lot of preparation and maybe you've thought a lot about what's important to the other person and you're under time constraints, curiosity is usually not high on your list. So here's what I would coach you to do. Internally, have a negotiation. Put down on a piece of paper, perhaps, reasons why you just want to make your case, and then reasons why it's important to be curious. And I guarantee you, if you do this well, you will have more than one reason to be curious. And every time in that negotiation, when you're feeling like it's time to make my case, remind yourself of the side of yourself that needs to learn more.
Hold that thought.
I have found this to be a highly effective way, particularly in situations when I think I know it all and I don't need to hear from them anymore, to get myself to that curious spot. And the reason why that's helpful is if you are just mouthing the words that I tell you, you will look false, you will look affected, you will not look authentic. When you have the real curiosity though, the questions come across as sincere and genuine and real. The second piece of advice is asking open-ended questions. So what do I mean by open-ended questions? An open-ended question is one that does not elicit a yes or no answer, or that doesn't have at the end, is it either this or that? Open-ended questions are questions that actually elicit broad and fulsome answers. So they're things like, help me understand, say more about, please elaborate on. Each of those questions invites and, in fact, expects more than a one-word answer. And the reason why I think this is really important is your purpose in asking the question is not to nail them down. Your purpose is to really understand them. And an open-ended question gives them the most space to say what really matters and what's really important to them.
You got that?
Third important tip is to avoid compound questions. So what is a compound question? Compound question is a question that actually has 3 or 4 other questions all put together.
Wait, what?
And I'll give you an example. When I first started as a teaching assistant many years ago, and I was facilitating small groups, I would have a list of questions to ask as part of the debrief. And it might be something like, what did you do in this negotiation that worked? That'd be like the first question. And then the second question would be like, well, what should you do differently? And the third question might be like something like, I don't know, what surprised you? And all of those, by the way, are really nice questions because each of them is an open-ended question. It involves, again, more than yes or no or either or. But here's where I would go awry. I would say, what worked? And then wait about 5 seconds. And then I would say, what would you do differently? And wait about 5 seconds. And then say, what surprised you? Well, now what I've done is I've actually confused the person on the other side.
Lots of questions.
What is the question? They're confused. Is it what worked? Is it surprises? Is it what should I do differently? Ask a very simple question and then pause. And make the pause feel awkward, like maybe it's 5 or even 10 seconds. Don't follow it up. In the pause, they're often thinking about an answer. And I have found that those answers are always the very best answers because they are not prompted and it's forced the person to think about it. I've learned the most information that way. Last piece of advice is monitor your tone in asking questions. So another way of thinking about this is what I say, avoid hot inquiry. So what is hot inquiry? Many times in a negotiation, I hear someone asking a question, but it's kind of a sparky question that is really more of looking for a fight So something like, well, you don't really believe that, do you? Or, but isn't it true A, B, C, and D? It is true that all of those things are questions, but they're not the kinds of questions that seem curious. They're the kinds of questions that actually have an embedded argument with a question mark at the end. So monitoring the tone to have a sense of sincerity, curiosity, and genuineness really matters. So now you know the how and the why to ask questions. What do you do if the other side is stonewalling in the negotiation? Check out this next video for some answers and tips. I'm Bob Bordone. See you next time. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.